Hello folks, welcome to our channel Jose. Today we're going to show you and give you an idea how to replace the two front shocks on a 91 to 94 Toyota Tercel, and we're going to be putting on the dust boots on them and the two insulator as well. So we're going to give you an idea. 95 to 99 Toyota Tercel is very similar process, so we're going to show you how you can do it to your car, and also for the Paseo is pretty much the same procedure. So with that said, let's get started. Okay folks, so now you have your car in a stance and you took the wheels off, and next thing you want to do is that you want to take the new shock or strut that you are going to put in your car, open the box and compare it to what's on your car. So if they're the similar or they're the same thing, then you proceed with taking components off. But if you start taking components off and then you open the box and then you find out that what's in the box is not the same as your car, now you're going to have a problem. That's why you verify to make sure that what you're taking out is the same what you're going to be putting in. That way you avoid headaches. With that, we continue. We open the box and compare it. So now that we have verified that this component that we have on our hand, this strut or shock, is the same as the one in the car, we proceed on taking off the one that is in the car. So to take off the strut from the bottom, what we have to do is we have to remove 3 bolts. We have to remove this big one, this other big one. They're 19mm nuts and bolts. There's 2 of them. And then there's this one right there that is a 14mm that secures the brake line to the strut so it doesn't rub anywhere. So that's a securing point for the brake line. So we have to remove that because it's attached to the strut. So these 2 main bolts that attach the strut to the suspension or the spindle, and that little one that is a 14mm from the strut as well. So we remove those, and then we continue to remove them from the strut tower on the top. So now that we have removed the 14mm bolt for the brake line into the strut, and then the 2 main ones, we loosen them and we took one out. You leave one just to keep the suspension not from hanging, and then the strut while we work in the upper piece of the strut. So we leave one bolt just in there so we can continue on the top, and then we can start taking it out. Okay folks, so now we're in the driver's side strut. What we're going to be doing is there's a 3 12mm nuts and 1 12mm bolt. We're gonna take off all these 4 off. Usually the 91 to 94 Toyota Tercel, this bolt is not there, but we added it on so we can have another extra securing point. So with that said, we also we're gonna be loosening up this nut that holds the strut into the strut tower, which gets everything compressed with the spring and everything. This is the nut that keeps all the structure together on the strut side. These 12mm ones keep it to the strut into the chassis of the car. So we're gonna be losing that one so we can get a couple threads off, so when we are working on it to take it apart, the strut part apart, we don't work as hard and we don't hurt ourselves. So we loosen that and take those off. And that nut is a 19mm for at this point for us, so we're gonna loosen it up a little bit. So we loosen it a little bit while it's in the car, so that way we know that it's gonna spin. So we just loosen it to where it's just this the strut comes just a little bit out of the nut, and that's a Teflon nut. So now what we did is we took off this bolt completely off, this nut completely off, and we left 2 nuts just loose because we can start pushing this strut completely down. So that's just to keep the strut from falling down in case the strut comes off loose completely, and that way you keep it from falling straight down. So we'd remove that lower bolt, and then we can remove this nut, or we can remove this nut and work in the lower bolt so we can remove the strut. So what we did now is we removed that 3 nuts and the bolt from the upper strut mount. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna remove this bolt now, and we have to control it because now once we remove this, it's completely detached from the car and we can work it out. So now we're gonna be this is the strut that we just took out of our Tercel, and we're gonna be transferring the spring and the strut mount, the top, to this strut. And for that we're gonna have to compress the spring so we can loosen and taking that nut completely off, because that's what keeps all this compressed and as a structure. So we're gonna transfer that to this one, and this one comes with a new nut. So we do that now. Before we start transferring the spring and the upper components to this strut, what we're going to be doing is we're going to put that spring and strut insulator that goes right here, so that causes the spring not to squeak or make any noises or move around. And also we're going to be adding that dust boot that doesn't have on this other one to this one, so we're going to have a fresh, more cleaner and more complete strut when we put it back into our car. So with that, we put all those components before we start transferring the other stuff to this one. One thing I want to say is that we want to share this info, that if you're trying to get the insulator for your 91 to 94 Toyota Tercel and you can't find it, order the 95 to 99 Toyota Tercel insulator, and it's the same one. It fits exactly the same. They just sometimes they say that they don't have it for your car, but if you order the 95 to 99 Toyota Tercel, it fits right on. And these are made by KYB, usually run about $5 to $7 a piece at auto parts, and if you order it online you might find it on different prices, but these, we checked the price on these and they were about $6. So these fit 91 to 99 Toyota Tercel. So now that we have put the insulator, what we're going to be putting is we're going to put the dust boot, and what it comes is with this bushing, and we put it on the strut. We remove the nut and we put it on the strut, and then we put this boot over and it falls right in there. And now what we can do is we can transfer all the other components from the other strut into this. So now this one, what protects is the dust and the water not hitting the strut rod, so it works cleaner and it makes your strut last longer. So now we transfer all that to this. So now what we're going to be using is we're going to be using our strut compressor, so we can compress this spring, so we can take off this top nut off, because there's pressure right here on this strut right now. So we compress the strut. That gives us the freedom to take this nut, and then we can release the strut off of the structure and we can put the new one in. And that is very critical. You don't want to take this nut off when this spring is not compressed by another tool. This is the most critical part about removing struts or removing springs from struts, because it can be very dangerous if you don't have tools that are made for this kind of jobs. So we're going to show you how we do this. So as you can see, we have released the spring from the strut, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to compress it a little bit more so we can have more clearance, and then we'll take that top nut off so we can extract this strut down and then put a new one in. So now we have the old one and the new one, and we're gonna compress them both, and we're gonna show you the difference between an old one and a new strut. And we want to say thank you to KYB for these struts, because it was ready, it was time for us to replace them as well. So now, as you can see, this one still keep coming out, and this one is already completely out. And this is the used one, new one, and it was time for us to replace them. So it wasn't doing its full job now. So with this new one, it's gonna be a lot different. So we put everything on this, and we show you how we put it on. So now, before we start putting the strut on, we wanna show you something. This is the strut top of it, the bearing, and this is where the nut goes in. And then once the strut goes through, you tighten the strut against this, and it will hold the spring also encapsulated. So one thing you want to make sure that you're doing right is when you remove this part and you see that there's a groove, there's a special groove, and we want to show you what we mean by that. The strut has it as well. You see those cuts, those two cuts? So when you put the strut into this tower, you want to make sure that you line up those grooves with the strut. You see? Because if you put it on and it ends up crooked, and then later on you're gonna have problems. Line up those grooves. So now we have put the insulator for the spring on the lower part of the strut, the dust cover, dust boot, and then we have still compressed the spring. So we're gonna feed it through the bottom, guide the grooves into the strut tower, and then we're gonna put that nut on the top, start tightening it, and that way we can start tightening it completely and then decompress the spring so it creates and it gets encapsulated in the strut. You want to make sure that when you're doing tightening the nut, don't cross thread it, because you're going to have problems. You want to make sure you start it by hand and then put the impact, and you can tighten it. And always make sure that you completely tighten it before you release the pressure on the machine or your tools, because otherwise, if it's not fully in there, it's going to pop out and it can hurt you really bad. Now everything's guided, and what we have done is we have put the nut on top and we threaded it all the way to the Teflon touches the threads. So now what we did is we expanded we stretched the spring, so now it has tension into the structure. Now what we can do is we can tighten that nut completely down with the impact wrench, and then we can release the pressure. So now the spring is going to be encapsulated and it's ready to go into the car. So now we have put the strut into the spring, or we have replaced everything. We have put the bottom insulator for the spring. We guided the strut to the top piece of the structure, and we put everything on. The dust boot as well is going to be loose, but it's like accordion, so when it compresses it works with the suspension. And then we put that nut that holds everything together, so we tighten it well as well. So we put it back into the car now. Now we have the strut complete, so we're going to be putting it in. This part on this structure, this goes towards the front, because that's where the bolt that's where the bolt is going to thread into, and then the rest is going to be the nuts, and then this one is going to be towards the outside in the spindle. So we feed it in. Be careful with your brake line not to rip it or break it. So we put it in now. So while we're feeding it up, and then we start guiding it, we put two nuts, so we hold the weight. It holds itself, so it gives us plate to work below as well. So we put these two and hold it there, so that way we can work with it on the bottom. So now that we have put all the bolt and the three nuts in the top, they're just loose, but we're gonna go continue in the lower part because the weight is being held by this structure now. But we wanna go put everything below, tighten it, and then we come up here and tighten all this as well. So now that we have guided the two 19mm bolts and put the nuts on, then we tighten them, and then we put the security brake line into the strut with the bolt, and then we can tighten the upper ones as well. So now we have tightened in the two 19mm bolts and nuts, and then the brake line 14mm, and now we go up here and we tighten the three nuts and the bolt. So we are almost done with the process of replacing the strut or the shock on this car. So now that the strut is in the car, we're just gonna make sure that it's tight, a quick pull on the gun. So now that we tighten it. And well, folks, this is the final product. We have replaced our strut, and then we have used, thanks to KYB for sending us these struts, and it was time for us to replace them, so it worked just perfect. And we're gonna say thank you for KYB for the products. So the process of replacing it, we show you how we did it, and the most important thing is that when you're compressing these springs on these struts, you want to do it with special tools, or at least in a controlled environment, because if this nut is being taken off and that's energy and the spring is released, when this nut gets shoot out, it can hurt somebody and send them to the hospital. This is a really critical part when you're changing spring struts and you're replacing just the strut or the shock, and you're keeping the other components. And one thing I want to say as well is that the insulator that goes right below this lip and the strut, that sometimes they say they don't make it, or they don't have it for the 91 to 94 Toyota Tercel, but it works from the 95 to the 99 Toyota Tercel, and that is the same base. The only thing that changes is the strut, the upper piece, it doesn't fit. The struts have different cuts or different groups, so the 91 to 94 is different than the 95 to the 99 strut. Even if they have the same lower base, the upper piece, it might not fit because it's different groups on how they fit into the strut tower. So you want to be careful on that one. If you buy the strut for a 95 to a 99 Toyota Tercel and you want to fit them on your 91 to 94, it's not going to fit because due to the groups. So be careful on that. But the grommet, the insulator, and the dust boot, they fit the same. So the tools that we use on this was the spring compressor to control the energy, and then we use a 19mm impact socket and a wrench, and then we use a 12mm socket for the upper base, and then we use a 14mm socket for the brake hose, so we can take that off because it's attached to the strut base. So with that, is not many tools. Just want to be safe when you're taking the spring off of it. This is the video for the driver's side. Soon we're going to have the passenger side video as well. And if we miss some info on this video, hopefully in the next video we can expose a little bit more. So that way it's about the same process, but it's just the left and the right. And then it's the same components, but the struts do have sides. You have the driver's side, and then you have the passenger side strut as well. So hopefully in the next video we have more info that we probably, in case we missed it on this one. And with that said, folks, we want to say thank you again for KYB for sending us these products. For those folks who are watching our video and haven't subscribed to our channel, please subscribe. If you like our video, give us thumbs up, share it, and we'll see you soon with more videos here in el canal El Chano Jose.